In the heart of a bustling city, Rohan Sharma was a name that echoed in high society. A successful businessman with a sharp suit and an even sharper mind, he had built an empire from scratch. His luxurious penthouse overlooked the city skyline, his car collection turned heads, and his social calendar was always full. To the outside world, Rohan was the definition of success, a man who seemed to have it all. But behind the polished exterior lay cracks in his perfect life. At home, Rohan lived with Priya, his wife of 7 years. Unlike him, Priya was soft-spoken and unassuming. She came from a modest background, where simplicity and hard work were valued over wealth and status. When they first met, Rohan had been charmed by her kindness and warmth. But as his career soared and his circle expanded, he began to see her differently. Her quiet nature, once endearing, now felt like a liability. Her simple cerise and lack of interest in flashy parties made her stand out, but not in the way Rohan wanted. Rohan started comparing Priya to the women he met at his events, women who dazzled with their designer dresses and confident laughter. He convinced himself that Priya didn't belong in his world anymore. The more he thought about it, the more he resented her presence. Yet, despite his growing dissatisfaction, he couldn't bring himself to confront her directly. Instead, he distanced himself emotionally, treating her more like an employee than a partner. One evening, Rohan hosted a grand party at his penthouse. The guest list included business tycoons, celebrities, and influential personalities. As the night unfolded, conversations flowed smoothly, glasses clinked, and laughter filled the air. Priya stayed mostly in the background, ensuring everything ran perfectly. She served drinks, greeted guests politely, and avoided drawing attention to herself. At one point, a prominent guest approached Rohan and asked, "And who is this lovely lady?" pointing toward Priya. For a moment, Rohan hesitated. Introducing her as his wife would mean acknowledging their relationship and admitting that someone so ordinary was part of his glamorous life. His pride got the better of him. With a forced smile, he replied casually, "Oh, she's just the maid." The room fell silent for a split second before murmurs broke out among the guests. Some looked uncomfortable, others exchanged knowing glances. Priya, standing nearby, heard every word. Her face flushed red, but she didn't say anything. Instead, she excused herself quietly and retreated to the kitchen, her hands trembling as she set down the tray of hors d'oeuvres. Later that night, when the guests had left and the house was finally quiet, Rohan found Priya sitting alone on the couch. He expected anger or tears, but instead, he saw something far worse: silence. There was no accusation, no argument, just a deep sadness in her eyes that cut through him. For the first time, Rohan felt a pang of guilt, but he quickly pushed it aside, convincing himself that he had done nothing wrong. After all, wasn't he entitled to protect his image? Little did he know, this moment would mark the beginning of a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. Priya returned to her hometown, a small but vibrant town surrounded by green fields and friendly faces. It was a place that had always felt like home, a stark contrast to the cold, polished city life she had left behind. Her family welcomed her with open arms, though they could sense the sadness hidden beneath her calm demeanor. At first, Priya kept to herself, spending hours in her room or helping her mother cook meals. She didn't talk much about what had happened, but her quiet strength spoke volumes. One afternoon, while visiting the local market, Priya ran into an old friend named Meera. Meera had been her classmate back in school and now worked as a volunteer at the community center. Over cups of steaming tea, they caught up on old times. When Meera casually asked how life in the city was, Priya hesitated before giving a vague response. Sensing there was more to the story, Meera gently changed the subject and invited Priya to visit the community center. Curious, Priya agreed. The next day, she accompanied Meera to the center, which was buzzing with activity. Women of all ages gathered in groups, learning new skills like sewing, embroidery, and even basic computer literacy. Children played games under the watchful eyes of volunteers, their laughter filling the air. For the first time in months, Priya felt a flicker of joy. There was something deeply satisfying about seeing people come together to support one another. Mira noticed Priya's interest and suggested she join them as a volunteer. "You've always been such a caring person," Mira said. "Why not share your talents here? These women could really benefit from someone like you." Initially hesitant, Priya decided to give it a try. She started by teaching simple cooking techniques, recipes she had learned from her mother and grandmother. To her surprise, the women loved her sessions. They admired her patience and creativity, often staying behind after class to ask questions or exchange stories. As weeks passed, Priya found herself becoming more involved. She began organizing workshops for women who wanted to learn tailoring so they could start small businesses. She also taught budgeting and financial planning, encouraging them to save money and invest in their futures. What started as a way to pass the time soon turned into a passion project. Watching these women gain confidence and independence inspired Priya in ways she hadn't expected. Her own transformation began subtly. She enrolled in online courses to improve her communication skills and broaden her knowledge. Late at night, after everyone else was asleep, she would sit by the window with her laptop, soaking up information about leadership, entrepreneurship, and personal development. Slowly but surely, Priya rediscovered parts of herself she thought she'd lost. The curious girl who dreamed big, the determined young woman who believed in her potential. Word of Priya's work spread quickly through the town. People began referring to her as the woman who empowers others. Local leaders took notice and offered their support, providing resources and spreading awareness about her initiatives. Priya realized that her efforts weren't just helping individuals, they were creating ripples of change throughout the community. Through it all, Priya never forgot the pain she had endured. But instead of letting it define her, she used it as fuel to grow stronger. She understood now that true strength came from within, not from external validation. Every stitch sewn by the women in her workshops, every smile on a child's face, reminded her of her purpose. And though she still thought about Rohan occasionally, those thoughts no longer carried the weight of regret or longing. Instead, they served as a reminder of how far she had come and how much farther she could go. Priya's life had always been one of quiet resilience. Growing up in a small town, she learned early on the value of hard work and humility. Her parents, though not wealthy, instilled in her a deep sense of gratitude and kindness. These qualities stayed with her even after she married Rohan and moved to the city. While their lives changed dramatically, Priya remained grounded, finding joy in simple things, cooking meals, tending to their home, and supporting Rohan in his ambitions. But as time went on, the distance between them grew wider. Rohan was often consumed by work, leaving little room for meaningful conversations or shared moments. Priya tried not to let it bother her. She told herself that this was just how life was for successful people: busy schedules, high expectations, and sacrifices along the way. Yet, no matter how much she rationalized it, the sting of his neglect lingered. Every dismissive comment, every cold glance, chipped away at her self-esteem. Despite everything, Priya continued to play her role dutifully. She woke up early each morning to prepare breakfast, ensured the house was spotless, and handled all household responsibilities without complaint. On days when Rohan came home late, she waited patiently, hoping for a moment of connection. But more often than not, he barely acknowledged her presence. It wasn't uncommon for him to spend hours locked in his study, either working or scrolling through social media, while she sat alone in the living room. What hurt the most, however, was the growing realization that Rohan didn't see her as an equal anymore. He spoke to her like she was an employee rather than a partner. Sometimes, he'd ask her to handle guests during parties, referring to her tasks as if she were merely staff. Other times, he criticized her choices, her clothes, her mannerisms, even the way she spoke. Each remark felt like a tiny cut, adding up over time until they left invisible scars. Still, Priya chose not to fight back. She believed that love required patience and understanding. Maybe, she thought, Rohan was under too much pressure. Maybe he didn't mean the things he said. Deep down, she clung to the hope that he would eventually remember the man he used to be, the one who had once held her hand and promised to stand by her side no matter what. One evening, as she stood in front of the mirror brushing her hair, Priya caught a glimpse of herself. For a moment, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Gone was the bright-eyed girl who had dreamed of building a happy life with Rohan. In her place was someone quieter, sadder, and weighed down by unspoken pain. A wave of sadness washed over her, but she quickly shook it off. Crying wouldn't solve anything, she reminded herself. Instead, she focused on keeping busy, folding laundry, organizing shelves, doing anything to distract herself from the emptiness inside. Meanwhile, Rohan barely noticed the toll his actions were taking on Priya. To him, her silence was proof that she accepted her role in their marriage. He convinced himself that he was justified in treating her the way he did. After all, hadn't he provided her with everything she needed? A comfortable home, financial security, and a life far better than the one she'd left behind. Yet, beneath his confident exterior, a faint voice of guilt whispered to him. It surfaced whenever he saw the sadness in Priya's eyes or heard her soft good night before she turned off the lights. But Rohan quickly silenced it, telling himself that relationships were complicated and that everyone had their struggles. What he failed to realize was that his indifference was slowly eroding the foundation of their marriage, and that sooner or later, something would have to give. Weeks passed, and Rohan couldn't shake off the weight of what he had read about Priya. Her story haunted him, not just because it exposed his mistakes, but because it revealed the incredible person she had become despite them. He found himself replaying her words from the article. Sometimes, life gives us moments that force us to pause and rethink our paths. Those words echoed in his mind, urging him to confront the man he had become. One morning, after another sleepless night filled with regret, Rohan made a decision. He packed a small bag, got into his car, and drove to Priya's hometown, the place he hadn't visited since their wedding years ago. The journey felt longer than he remembered, each mile giving him more time to reflect on his past behavior. By the time he arrived, his nerves were frayed, but his resolve was firm. When Rohan reached the community center, he saw Priya standing on a makeshift stage, addressing a crowd of women and children. She looked radiant, her face glowing with confidence as she spoke passionately about resilience and self-worth. Rohan stood at the back of the room, unnoticed, listening intently. Her voice was calm yet powerful, and her words carried a wisdom that left the audience spellbound. For the first time, Rohan truly understood the depth of her strength and how much he had underestimated her. After the session ended, the crowd dispersed, and Priya began packing up her materials. That's when Rohan approached her, his heart pounding. "Priya," he said softly, his voice trembling. She turned around, startled to see him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, breaking the silence, Rohan blurted out, "I'm so sorry. I don't even know where to begin." Priya studied him carefully, her expression unreadable. Finally, she gestured for him to sit down on a nearby bench. They sat in awkward silence for a few minutes before Rohan mustered the courage to continue. "I came here because I needed to see you," he admitted. "I spent months trying to reach out, but nothing prepared me for this, for seeing everything you've built here. You're amazing, Priya, truly amazing." His words hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. Priya listened without interrupting, her eyes fixed on him. When he finished, tears streaming down his face, she finally spoke. "Rohan," she said gently, "your apology means something to me. But apologies alone can't undo what happened. What you did hurt me deeply. It broke me in ways I didn't think I could recover from. And while I forgave you long ago, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting." Rohan nodded, swallowing hard. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," he said. "But I want to change. Not for you, not for anyone else. but for myself. I realized too late how wrong I was about so many things. About you, about us, about what really matters in life. Priya sighed, her gaze softening slightly. Change isn't easy, she said. It takes effort, honesty, and patience. If you're serious about changing, start by respecting yourself first. Only then can you learn to respect others. Her words struck a chord within Rohan. He realized she wasn't rejecting him outright. She was giving him a chance to grow. Grateful for her grace, he promised to take responsibility for his actions. "Thank you for hearing me out," he said quietly. "I won't bother you again unless you allow it. But please know that I'll do whatever it takes to become someone worthy of respect, even if that means letting you go for good." As they parted ways, Rohan felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and hope. For the first time in years, he felt like he had a clear path forward, even if it meant walking it alone. As for Priya, she watched him leave with a sense of peace. She knew closure wasn't about erasing the past. It was about accepting it and moving on with grace. Weeks turned into months, and life in the Sharma household continued in its strained rhythm. Rohan remained caught up in his world of meetings, deals, and social events, while Priya quietly carried on with her duties. But beneath her calm exterior, a storm was brewing. The night he introduced her as the maid had left an indelible mark on her heart. She replayed the moment over and over in her mind, each time feeling smaller and more invisible than before. Yet, she refused to let bitterness consume her. Instead, she began to think about what truly mattered to her. One evening, they attended another extravagant party at a friend's mansion. This time, Rohan made no effort to include Priya in conversations. He barely glanced at her as he mingled with guests, laughing loudly and shaking hands. Priya stood by the buffet table, holding a plate of food she didn't feel like eating. Other guests politely nodded at her or avoided eye contact altogether. It was clear that word of Rohan's behavior had spread, and people weren't sure how to treat her. As the hours dragged on, Priya felt a deep sense of clarity wash over her. Standing there amidst the glittering chandeliers and designer outfits, she realized she didn't belong in this world. Not because she wasn't good enough, but because it wasn't where her heart lay. She thought about the dreams she'd once nurtured before marriage, the passion she'd set aside to support Rohan's ambitions. For the first time, she wondered if it was possible to reclaim those pieces of herself. The turning point came later that night when Rohan stumbled home drunk after the party. He barely noticed Priya sitting on the couch, staring out the window. When he finally did, he slurred something about needing water and disappeared into the kitchen. Priya sat frozen, her mind racing. She thought about all the times she'd swallowed her pride, all the nights she'd cried silently in bed, hoping things would get better. And then, with quiet determination, she made a decision. Early the next morning, while Rohan was still asleep, Priya packed a small bag with essentials, a few clothes, some personal belongings, and a notebook filled with notes and sketches from her younger days. She left a short note on the dining table. "I need time to think. Please respect my space." Without looking back, she walked out of the house that had been her home for years. When Rohan woke up later that afternoon, hungover and groggy, he found the apartment eerily silent. At first, he assumed Priya had gone grocery shopping or stepped out for fresh air. But as hours passed, and she didn't return, panic began to creep in. He called her phone repeatedly, only to hear it ring unanswered. Finally, he spotted the note on the table. His hands trembled as he read it, the weight of his actions crashing down on him. For days, Rohan tried reaching out to Priya through mutual friends and family members. Everyone reported the same thing. She didn't want to talk to him. Her silence cut deeper than any argument could have. For the first time in years, Rohan experienced what it felt like to be truly alone. The house, once filled with Priya's quiet presence, now seemed hollow. Meals went uneaten, chores piled up, and the emptiness echoed in every corner. Desperate to understand why Priya had left, Rohan began reflecting on their relationship. Memories flooded back. The early days when they laughed together, shared dreams, and leaned on each other during tough times. He remembered how proud he used to be of her strength and simplicity. Slowly, painfully, he started to see how much he had taken her for granted. His pride, his obsession with appearances, and his inability to appreciate her worth had driven her away. But no matter how many realizations hit him, one truth remained undeniable. Priya was gone. And for the first time, Rohan understood that love wasn't just about providing material comforts. It was about respect, understanding, and partnership. As guilt gnawed at him day and night, he vowed to find a way to make amends. If not for her sake, then for his own. Priya's quiet work in her hometown soon caught the attention of more than just her local community. One day, a journalist named Anjali visited the community center, curious about the buzz surrounding Priya's initiatives. Anjali spent hours observing the workshops, speaking with the women who attended, and interviewing Priya herself. At first, Priya was hesitant to share her story. She didn't want pity or sympathy, but Anjali's genuine curiosity and kindness put her at ease. The article that followed was titled, "From Humiliation to Empowerment: The Inspiring Journey of Priya Sharma." It highlighted not only her efforts to uplift marginalized women, but also her personal journey of resilience. The piece painted a vivid picture of how she had turned pain into purpose, transforming her life while inspiring others along the way. When the article was published online, it quickly gained traction. People across the country were moved by her story, sharing it on social media and praising her courage. Soon, invitations began pouring in for Priya to speak at events, conferences, and seminars. Organizations working toward women's empowerment reached out, eager to collaborate with her. Initially overwhelmed by the sudden attention, Priya took some time to reflect. She knew this was an opportunity to amplify her message and reach even more people, but she wanted to stay true to herself. After consulting with Meera and her family, she decided to embrace the platform she had been given. Her first public speaking engagement was at a regional conference focused on rural development. As she stepped onto the stage, her heart raced. Public speaking wasn't something she had ever imagined doing, but she reminded herself why she was there: to honor the women whose lives she had touched and to inspire others to believe in their own potential. Taking a deep breath, she began her speech. "I never thought I'd be standing here today," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "A few months ago, I felt like I had lost everything: my confidence, my identity, my sense of worth. But sometimes, life gives us moments that force us to pause and rethink our paths. For me, that moment came when I realized I had two choices. I could let my circumstances define me, or I could rise above them." She went on to share snippets of her journey, the challenges she faced, the lessons she learned, and the joy she found in helping others. Her words resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom approached her afterward to express their gratitude. Some shared their own struggles, saying her story gave them hope. Others asked for advice on starting similar initiatives in their communities. By the end of the event, Priya felt a renewed sense of purpose. Back home, the impact of her growing fame became evident. Local businesses offered to sponsor her programs, and young volunteers joined the community center, eager to contribute. Even government officials took notice, promising support for expanding her workshops to neighboring towns. Priya worked tirelessly, ensuring that every step forward stayed rooted in authenticity and compassion. Meanwhile, Rohan stumbled upon one of the articles about Priya during a late-night scroll through his phone. At first, he scrolled past it absent-mindedly, but something made him go back. As he read the headline, his stomach dropped. He clicked on the link and devoured the entire piece, feeling a mix of emotions: pride, guilt, and disbelief. The woman described in the article seemed so different from the Priya he remembered. She sounded confident, accomplished, and unstoppable. Rohan couldn't help but compare her success to his own hollow achievements. His wealth and status suddenly felt meaningless compared to the meaningful change Priya was creating. He thought about the countless times he had dismissed her, assuming she lacked ambition or drive. Now he saw how wrong he had been. Priya hadn't needed his approval to shine. She had always carried that light within her. He just hadn't bothered to see it. Haunted by these thoughts, Rowan decided to reach out. He called mutual friends, asking for updates on where she was living and what she was doing. Though no one encouraged him to contact her directly, they hinted that she was happier than ever before. This realization hit Rowan hard. For the first time, he understood that his actions, or lack thereof, had pushed her away. And though he desperately wanted to make amends, he knew it wouldn't be easy. Priya had built a new life without him, and earning her trust again would require more than just apologies. It would demand real change. In the weeks that followed their meeting, Rowan returned to the city with a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in years, he felt clarity about what truly mattered in life. The image of Priya standing confidently on that stage stayed etched in his mind, a constant reminder of how far she had come and how much work he still needed to do. He knew apologies weren't enough. Actions spoke louder than words, and he was determined to prove himself, not just to Priya, but to himself. Rowan began making changes, starting with the way he lived. He sold off some of his luxury cars and extravagant possessions, realizing they no longer brought him joy. Instead, he donated the proceeds to charitable organizations focused on women's empowerment and education, causes close to Priya's heart. At first, his friends teased him, asking why he was throwing away his wealth. But Rowan didn't care. For once, he wanted his money to mean something beyond status symbols. He also started volunteering at a local shelter for underprivileged families, something he never imagined himself doing before. The experience humbled him deeply. Listening to people share their struggles reminded him of how fortunate he was, and how blind he had been to the needs of others. Slowly, he began building connections with people who valued kindness over appearances. These interactions taught him lessons money couldn't buy: empathy, patience, and gratitude. Meanwhile, Priya continued thriving in her mission. Her workshops expanded to neighboring towns, reaching hundreds of women eager to learn new skills and gain independence. She became a beacon of hope, not just locally but nationally. Invitations poured in for speaking engagements, panel discussions, and collaborations with NGOs. Despite her growing fame, Priya remained grounded, always crediting her success to the community that supported her. Though their lives were separate, Rowan occasionally sent messages through mutual friends, updating Priya on his progress. He avoided being intrusive, respecting her boundaries while letting her know he was serious about changing. Priya appreciated his efforts but kept her distance, unsure if reconciliation was possible or even necessary. Still, hearing about his transformation gave her a quiet sense of satisfaction. It showed her that people could change when they truly wanted to. Months later, Rowan received an unexpected invitation in the mail. It was an elegant card announcing Priya as the recipient of a prestigious national award for her contributions to women's empowerment. The ceremony would take place in the capital city, attended by leaders from various fields. Though hesitant to attend, Rowan decided to go, not to win her back, but to show his genuine support. On the day of the event, Rowan dressed simply, feeling out of place among the glittering crowd. As he took his seat in the grand hall, he scanned the room nervously, spotting Priya seated near the front with other honorees. She looked radiant in a maroon silk saree, exuding confidence and grace. When her name was called, she walked up to the stage to thunderous applause, accepting the award with a smile that lit up the room. During her acceptance speech, Priya spoke passionately about resilience, self-worth, and the power of community. She thanked her family, friends, and volunteers who had supported her journey. Then, unexpectedly, she turned toward the audience and said, "There are moments in life when we face challenges that seem insurmountable, and sometimes those challenges come from the people closest to us." Her gaze briefly met Rowan's across the room. "To the person who once called me a maid," she continued, her voice steady, "I want to say thank you. Your words pushed me to discover my true strength." They forced me to step out of the shadows and into the light. Today, I stand here not because of what you did, but because of how I chose to respond." The audience erupted into applause, moved by her poise and wisdom. Rowan sat frozen in his chair, tears streaming down his face. In that moment, he realized Priya had forgiven him, not because she owed it to him, but because she had risen above bitterness. Her ability to see the good in every situation, even the painful ones, inspired everyone present, including him. As the ceremony concluded, Rowan approached Priya cautiously. She greeted him warmly this time, acknowledging his efforts without resentment. They exchanged a few polite words, both aware that their paths might never fully align again. Yet there was mutual respect between them now, a quiet understanding that they had both grown in different ways. Walking away from the event, Rowan felt lighter than he had in years. He knew his journey wasn't over, but for the first time, he believed in his ability to create a better version of himself, one worthy of respect and love. The months that followed the award ceremony marked a turning point for both Rowan and Priya. Though their lives remained separate, the impact of their individual journeys continued to ripple outward, touching the lives of those around them. For Rowan, the process of self-improvement became a lifelong commitment. He no longer sought validation through wealth or status, but instead found fulfillment in meaningful actions. His volunteer work at the shelter evolved into something deeper. He began mentoring young men from underprivileged backgrounds, teaching them the importance of respect, humility, and integrity. Rowan's transformation wasn't immediate or easy. There were days when guilt over his past behavior threatened to overwhelm him, but he reminded himself of Priya's words. Change isn't easy. It takes effort, honesty, and patience. Slowly, he rebuilt his life brick by brick, letting go of old habits and embracing new perspectives. Friends who had once dismissed his efforts as fleeting noticed the sincerity in his actions and began supporting him. Even his family, who had quietly worried about his earlier arrogance, expressed pride in the man he was becoming. Meanwhile, Priya's star continued to rise. Her workshops expanded further, reaching women in remote villages and urban slums alike. She collaborated with government programs, NGOs, and international organizations to create sustainable initiatives that empowered women economically and socially. Her speeches inspired countless individuals, not just women but also men, to rethink societal norms and challenge gender stereotypes. People admired her resilience and wisdom, often referring to her as the woman who turned pain into purpose. Yet, despite her growing fame, Priya remained humble. She credited her success to the collective strength of the women she worked with and the lessons she had learned along the way. In interviews, she often spoke about the importance of forgiveness, not as a favor to others, but as a gift to oneself. Holding on to anger only weighs you down, she would say. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over bitterness. Though they rarely crossed paths after the ceremony, Rowan occasionally heard updates about Priya through mutual friends. Each story filled him with admiration and a quiet sense of gratitude. He realized that her journey had indirectly shaped his own. Without her courage and grace, he might never have faced his flaws or embarked on this path of redemption. In a way, her strength had become a mirror, reflecting what he could aspire to be. One day, while volunteering at the shelter, Rowan received an unexpected phone call. It was Mira, Priya's childhood friend, inviting him to attend a special event, a community fair organized by Priya to celebrate 5 years of her empowerment programs. Hesitant but intrigued, Rowan accepted the invitation. When he arrived, he was struck by the vibrancy of the scene. Women displayed handmade crafts, children performed skits, and stalls offered free health checkups and educational resources. The atmosphere buzzed with laughter, hope, and camaraderie. Priya spotted him from across the field and walked over, greeting him warmly. "I'm glad you came," she said with a smile. This time, there was no awkwardness between them, just a shared understanding of how far they had both come. They exchanged pleasantries, discussing their respective projects and experiences. As they talked, Rowan couldn't help but marvel at the person standing before him. She radiated confidence, compassion, and authenticity, the very qualities he had once failed to see. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Rowan stood alone at the edge of the fairgrounds, watching families gather and children play. He felt a profound sense of peace, a realization that some things don't need to be fixed or forced. Priya didn't belong to his world anymore, and perhaps she never truly had. But that didn't diminish the impact she had on his life. She had taught him the value of self-respect, empathy, and growth, not through lectures but through her actions. As he prepared to leave, Rowan glanced back one last time. Priya was surrounded by a group of women, laughing and sharing stories. Her presence lit up the space, just as it always had. For the first time, Rowan understood that love wasn't about possession or control. It was about respecting someone enough to let them shine, even if it meant stepping aside. Walking away, Rowan felt lighter than ever before. He knew his journey wasn't perfect, and neither was he. But for the first time, he believed he was heading in the right direction. And somewhere in the distance, Priya smiled too, not because she had forgiven him completely, but because she saw the man he was striving to become. Their paths may have diverged, but their stories intertwined forever, each chapter reminding them of the power of resilience. Forgive.